Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to welcome you to our session today, which is the UNESCO's Chairs session on education for sustainable development. And I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody to this session. We're going to start off with an introduction by Professor Charles Hopkins, who will introduce himself and explain a little bit about the UNESCO Chairs program and its relationship to education for sustainable development. We'll then have a panel session, which we're very excited about, where we will have UNESCO Chairs speaking to each of the priority areas in the Education for Sustainable Development Action Plan. They will then be responded to by another UNESCO chair who will briefly respond to the main points. We'll try to keep this part as brief as possible because we would like to keep as much time as is possible for questions and answers from the floor. During the panel discussion, please do post any questions that you might have for the panel or comments into the chat, and those will be moderated. And we will then ask panel members to respond to those. We will then conclude the session with a brief summary and overview. So without further ado, over to you, please, Professor Hopkins.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leon, and thanks to my chair colleagues for giving me this opportunity to set the stage. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining this session on how the UNESCO Chairs and UNITWIN networks plan to contribute to ESD for 2030 roadmap. You know, the work of the UNESCO Chairs is a collaborative effort, really engaging universities, research institutions, and many other stakeholders right around the world. Coincidentally, the UNESCO Chairs program was set up in 1992, and that was the same year that Education for Sustainable Development was created as part of Agenda 21. That was the first global implementation strategy developed in Rio at the Earth Summit. Now, the concept of UNESCO Chairs was to further both UNESCO's capability by collaborating with leading researchers and their institutions around the world in UNESCO's field of competence and responsibility. That is, of course, education, science, culture, and communication. But beyond working with UNESCO, we as chairs focus on international collaboration on a north-south, south-south, east-west basis to further our own global research and teaching capabilities. Now, UNESCO, higher education, and the UNESCO Chairs, really, we've been engaged with sustainability from the outset. Sorry. Now, since the adoption of the concept of sustainable development in 1987, three main implementation strategies have been negotiated by nations. The first, Agenda 21 from 1992 to 2000, then the Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015, and now the Sustainable Development Goals. In all three, education in its broadest sense, including public awareness and training, was identified as an important means of implementing sustainable development. And in all three strategies, UNESCO chairs have played roles of providing research and training professionals as a crucial means of implementation. Now, however, though, with the ESD for 2030 roadmap, the UNESCO Chairs program is calling for engagement in policy recommendation, as well as contributing research and training. In other words, moving on from being a part of policy implementation to being a part of policy formulation. Earlier today, we heard of UNESCO's goal to have ESD embedded in all levels and forms of education and training by 2025. Now, this is a huge challenge for education systems at all levels. realistically, ESD is not even seen as an essential part of most teacher training or in-service, even though it was identified and requested. Well, I can remember as far back as 1996 at the Commission for Sustainable Development. A key issue was understanding what ESD was and how to move forward. Now, the simple way of comprehending ESD is the original 4 thrusts or areas of engagement. The first being access and retention in quality education. I recall there were 10 of us who were in the beginning in the late 1980s and 1990s who were writing the chapter for Agenda 21. And one at the table said, we really need more recycling. We just need better environmental education. And the Dean of the Faculty of Education in Cairo said, I have over 200,000 young people who are very, very good at recycling. In other words, he was talking about those who lived in the dumps of Cairo. He said what they really need is access to an education. But the second thrust is the one about reorienting existing education from its goal of development to more of sustainable development. And that's what we're hearing more and more, not only today, but in the lead up to today. The third being access to public awareness and understanding, and the fourth, training, really more specifically geared to small to medium-sized enterprise and so on. But basically, all of SDG 4 is really education for sustainable development. But now there's really renewed hope and impetus as we work towards higher education and working collaboratively with universities and colleges who really are the great shapers, you know, with their graduates of higher education, are the great shapers of future societies, to get them to actually model sustainability in a whole institution approach, embedding it in teaching, research, service, operations, and even the very culture. But across the entire education world, aligned with both the pandemic and a general questioning of education and education delivery systems, we're hearing things like education or ESD at the core of reimagined education. That was earlier this morning. All right. Education for sustainable development is a fundamental element of all learning, again this morning. Global competence as part of PISA. Transforming education, as we call for in ESD for 2030, and creating a sustainable future for all is the very purpose of education. So there is new hope. But also there's a recognition by the UN General Assembly, both in 2017 and again in 2019, of ESD not only within Sustainable Development Goal 4 as 4.7, but as a key enabler of all the SDGs. So in this broader context, within UNESCO Chairs, there's 2 groupings and 2 different roles for UNESCO Chairs. First of all chairs in education, science, culture, communication are to focus on the SDGs and UNESCO's medium-term strategy. But secondly, as well, there's a group of us as UNESCO chairs in education for sustainable development itself. And in a few moments, both will be presenting. So as we look at this, we see that, Sorry, I skipped one through. So basically, sorry. Now, I want to close really with the potential that ESD chairs have enormous potential to contribute to education for sustainable development. I mean, basically, we have we're free of diplomatic ties. We have academic freedom. We can address the big issues with authority. That, you know, things like ESD is not just planet. It's also about the other 4 aspects of sustainable development. It's about partnerships to grow and engage with people. It's about prosperity, and it's about peace. Chairs can collaborate to find ways to create and embed education for sustainable development indicators, whether it's in PISA or its other international equivalents, and even including ESD in rankings in higher education. Now, if we do the math and look at it, all chairs in UNITWIN networks must have a north-south or south-south collaborative network. And if you look at the map here, our UNESCO chair has 150 institutions, and we span 50 countries. Now, globally, currently, there are 839 chairs and 44 UNITWIN networks. Hence the potential, if you do the math, for more than 18,000 institutions and their chair researchers and teaching faculty to contribute. Now, there are challenges and opportunities for us. The challenge of the global discussion to seek and prepare alternative worldviews. Being able to reach out internationally is just part of our work. It is a great adds to our feasibility. The ability to conceptually try to improve on sustainable development itself as a concept, because we recognize it was the best we could do in 1987, but surely we can improve on that. And we can preparing to work in partnership with nations and right across all of academia. So the challenge of moving on from being part of policy implementation to being part of policy formulation, yet speaking with a global voice, that's what UNESCO chairs are. And thanks again for this opportunity from my colleagues. Back to you, Leon.
Thank you very much, Charles, for that wonderful overview. Really helpful, and I think it really helps to set the scene for what we're going to be talking about today. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I very rudely didn't introduce myself earlier. I am Leon Tickley, Professor Leon Tickley. I'm UNESCO Chair in Inclusive Good Quality Education for All at the University of Bristol. And I'm moderating today's session and the panel session that's about to follow. So in this next session, we're going to be talking about the priority areas for the ESD 2030 roadmap. And our UNESCO chairs have been intimately involved in the development of each of these priority areas, and will be doing some really exciting research around each of them. So I'm really looking forward to this session. We're not really sure what to expect, but we do expect it to be provocative and stimulating. So starting us off, we're going to have Professor Skoulos from Greece and Professor Didum from Norway responding to him. Professor Skoulos will be talking to the Priority Action Area 1, Advancing Policy. Then I'll introduce the other speakers subsequently. Professor Skoulos, would you mind introducing yourself and just saying the name of your chair as well? Thank you. And it's 5 minutes for you and then 2 minutes for your respondent. Over to you, Professor Skoulos. Professor Skoulos, I think that you might be on mute.
Yes, thank you very much, Leon. I'm Professor Michael Skoulos. I'm the director of the UNESCO Chair and Network on Sustainable Development Management and Education in the Mediterranean of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. And I'm very pleased to be with you, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Actually, dear fellow UNESCO chairholders, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, policies in general and in education and education for sustainable development, ESD in particular, are the necessary, very powerful instrument for transforming ideas into actions and concrete results. Good ideas are important, but not enough to draft policies. And as Charles just said, the expectations for policy formulation are more important now. Many of us have started many years ago on that. But policies and strategies for their formulation and dissemination are something wrong here. Sorry if I cannot share. An implementation to be useful and effective should be correct, because wrong policies actually may result in disasters or huge delays. I don't know why we cannot, it has been frozen, this. For policies to be correct, sorry for that, I don't know what is going on.
You stop sharing and share the right screen.
Do excuse us, ladies and gentlemen, we're having one or two minor technical issues.
Yes.
Professor
Okay.
Skoulas is back.
I continue. Can I continue like that? I don't know. Okay, leave it like that. Can you share? No. It doesn't allow me to have a presentation mode for some reason. So for policies to be correct, careful study, objective analysis, use of scientifically sound data, and deep knowledge of previous policies and their impact are necessary. Furthermore, even if our analyses are pessimistic, as is the case with many of the environmental issues today, our policies and the way to conduct them should be optimistic to become transformative. New interdisciplinary policies could be both very progressive and at the same time, they should secure continuity and smooth transition using adaptive approaches, favoring even radical pruning of the old tree rather than unrooting it by maintaining all positive things while allowing for new ideas to be integrated in order to keep policies fit for purpose, not superficial or fashionable, but adapted to the needs and conditions of the time. Allow me, because I have for many years worked on policies and actually also in formulating policies, to make reference to the oldest report I was involved with already in 1987, when UNESCO asked me to see if environmental education could promote other UN policies apart from protecting the environment. And at that time, I have identified actually, and I suggested that dealing with the root cause of the environmental degradation could have been the extension of the environmental education agenda. You will not be surprised that half of the room had left because we were in the Cold War period, and it was too hot political issue, such approach. Of course, imagine if this policy at that time had been already implemented 39 years ago. It is what we are discussing today. At the same time, in the same report, talking about envisioning the future, I have identified the then announced drafting of it was about to be completed, our common future report of Gro Harlem Brundtland as the eventual new policies source. So I think that after that, my chairs at that time in environment, oceanography, and the different networks, as Charles said, the Mediterranean Information Office and the MEDIS later on, bringing together hundreds of organizations together around the chair. We have drafted the reorienting of environmental education towards sustainable development, always with UNESCO and UNEP, and the big conference of Thessaloniki in '97. And we have mobilized a lot of political support through personalities and worked also later on for the education reaffirmation in introducing the, together with others, of course, the decade for education for sustainable development. And in Rio Plus 20, the presenting many of these policies and the one on Mediterranean strategy on ESD. These policies cover a big spectrum from the purpose and content of ESD, always revisiting and discussing with other chairs, to the ways also, individual subjects permeating many other and combinations, to the relationships between SDG, ESD, and the overall education and the quality issue, without losing the evolutionary character of ESD, and the relationships with the many different targeted forms of education, environmental education, citizenship, climate change, and the rest. Also, policies are important. We've heard from all the ministers their efforts to solidify and promote ESD. And this is done at the global level. We are now down to the national or federal level through, however, the regional level. And for us in the Mediterranean, this is extremely important because we are not a UN region, but we are an eco-region that is the link, the bridge between North and South, East and West, with different, of course, levels of development and different cultures around. And allow me to say that this was a successful approach. And let me say that the strategy to do that was important. We introduced that first to ministers of environment and climate change of the Union for the Mediterranean, a Euro-Mediterranean Forum. We have drafted it with the support of the Horizon 2020. We have presented it to Nagoya, and we then introduced that into the Barcelona Convention to be integral part of the Mediterranean strategy of sustainable development, and then approach the ministers, the Mediterranean ministers of education. It is important that the committee today include all the international organizations active in the region: UNESCO, UNEP, UNICE, Union for the Mediterranean, the League of Arab States, together with the countries. We introduce it then as a flagship there.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm going to have to stop.
Allow me to say one thing only.
I'm afraid we're going to have to move on because otherwise we won't have enough time for the other speakers. Forgive me. So thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And may I now invite Professor Didham, if you could please introduce yourself and give a very brief response, no more than 2 minutes, please.
Hello, I am Robert Didham, and I am the UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Lifestyles based at Inland Norway University of Applied Sciences. Michael, thank you for your very thorough provocation. Your presentation has covered many important points on how to advance policies for ESD. Thus, as a response, I think I can add to this most effectively by providing a summary of your points in relation to the ESD for 2030 framework and roadmap. As has been said many points throughout today, we start with the recognition that education serves as a cornerstone and a means of implementation for achieving all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. While SDG 4 and the new ESD for 2030 framework offer countries the possibility to galvanize education for sustainable development as a stimulus for a larger qualitative turn in educational reform and advancement. But to do this and how to consider this in policy from a policy perspective, improvements in the quality of education and the equitable access to it can have a wide diversity of development benefits that demonstrate a high return on investment. But for the promotion of ESD, especially as a vehicle for the advancement of the quality and relevance of education, this depends on clearly defined strategies and policies formulated in a holistic and integrated manner. Educational policies play a primary role in the effective implementation of ESD, and supportive policies can address various aspects, including reforming educational systems, strengthening curriculums, innovating pedagogies and teacher training, transforming learning environments, building diverse partnerships, and creating local learning opportunities. When we consider curriculum reform, ensuring flexibility in the curriculum allows for more opportunities to align teaching and real-world issues. It increases the practical relevance of learning, and it promotes effectiveness of ESD implementation with wider stakeholder involvement. Education practice should be framed around using progressive pedagogies and cooperative learning approaches with specific focus on student-centered learning, critical reflection, and problem solving. For this to be possible, teachers must also be equipped with appropriate pedagogical skills and methods through both pre-service and in-service training.
Thank you very much, Robert. That's very, very helpful response. And I think between you, you've really helped to set the scene for that particular priority area. Okay, now next I'd like to invite the next speakers, which are Professor Burgos. If you could please give your provocation around priority action area 2, transforming learning environments. Please, no more than 5 minutes, and very grateful if you could please introduce yourself and your chair. Thank you.
Of course. Hello, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup à tous. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I will discuss briefly about transforming learning environments. You want to know a little more about what we do at the chair regarding this issue, please go here, transgeniclearning.com. This is the website with all the information updated. I need a brief reflection out of 30 seconds just to say that we live in times of crisis. For instance, this is as of today, the status of COVID-19, the official status, with 100,000 million people in different status, okay? It's really worrying, but it's not the only crisis that we have so far. For instance, this is a very basic map of conflicts around the world, meaning wars, now with a different name, like this one from yesterday happening in Middle East. And if we go a little back, we can also check the migration map with almost every country with some sort of crisis, humanitarian crisis there, okay? And it happens here with the Katrina, and it happens here with the tsunami, and this happens here with the Mexico earthquake, and in Nepal, and even in the Everest, Mount Everest, okay? So crises are happening all the time. And now it's time to transform e-learning, because it's not just because of the pandemic, it's because it's happening everywhere all the time, and e-learning has to be a little different. So I come here with a number of recommendations, pretty simple. The first one is that we need to integrate formal, non-formal, and informal learning. It's not just either or, we have to engage all of them in a sensible, balanced way. The second one is that we need to combine online, blended, and face-to-face settings, exactly the same motto than before. It's not, we need to choose, no, we need to combine them all, okay? Because it's not possible anymore just to take the luxury of picking one over the other one. The third one is that we need to use learning analytics and other artificial intelligence to provide the most important part of learning when we talk about e-learning, the personalized experience to every learner and to every teacher, okay? Because the teacher is also part of this ecosystem. The fourth one is, of course, the integration of open education, open science, and proprietary resources. Again, we don't need to choose. we need to combine, we need to start some dialogue and find a commitment between all the parties in a balanced, sustainable model. And the last one is to foster digital inclusion as a key for social inclusion, including digital competencies, because nowadays, digital inclusion means social inclusion. We cannot disengage from both sides. So for instance, two examples. When we talk about open education and open science, usually people think about content, but this is not the case. We have content, access, technology, research data, results, licensing, a number of things, okay? So we need to combine them all just to make the right setting to exploit open education and open science. This is one example of the multilateral approach that we need to do regarding a matter. The second one is about the sustainability model, open proprietary. It's not a selection, it's a combination like the iceberg. We need the peak there, can be open and free access. Later, the next part is the register and free access. And the last one is the educational community access. So we can have a number of access to the content and whatever patents or results or whatever. And so we make a balanced approach. It's not a selection, it's a combination, okay? The next one is about the resources. If we provide public resources, we can get public outputs and we can retrieve these outputs and give it for free to people. So free access to outputs from public research is a must. And we need to do more just to make it accessible and available to everyone. It's not just a liability and something that a commitment coming from the contracts out of the funders. It's also a way to promote and to foster all these outputs. And the last one is that we need an integrated policy, in this case in higher education, but could be also beyond and secondary and other places, okay? An open policy that integrates all the stakeholders. Again, this is a call for dialogue. It's not a call for a selection. We need to combine them all, and this is the only way that online learning will succeed. You have here my contact information, should you want to reach me out. Thank you so much for your attention.
Daniel, thank you very much indeed for that really concise summary of that priority area. It's really appreciated. And now I have Professor Barth will be responding to that. Please may you introduce yourself briefly and give a 2-minute response. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will try my very best. Thanks for having me. My name is Matthias Barth. I'm representing the UNESCO Chair of Higher Education for Sustainable Development at Leuphana University. And first of all, I have to admit, I'm not feeling that provocated by you, Daniel. I very much liked your presentation and I can agree to many of these things. You know, I think what you presented really and aligns very well with the research we are doing here, where we are looking into how do we create open learning environments that can transform higher education? And I think you pointed out some of the very important, crucial ideas of such open learning environments. If I just take the first one of combining formal, non-formal and informal learning, I think that can't be stressed enough. I would even add on that, you know, make it to meaningful learning with communities, make it transdisciplinary learning where you engage different stakeholders, reach out for as much diverse group of learners as possible, because this will be then sort of the boiling place for really transformative learning. I think this is very important. I probably would only add like two aspects that might also shed light a bit on the idea of such open learning environments, and which I think fit nicely with the summary you gave to us. I think if we design such learning environments, what is important beside the aspects like open resources, open science ideas that you mentioned, for me are basically two things. Really, we need to also consider how do we create time and space for reflection, as reflection is sort of the driver for competence development. And if we want to make the learning meaningful, we need time and space for reflection. And having said that, my second point would be we also need to allow for a more failure-friendly culture. You know, we are learning by failures, but we are trained to only present and talk about best case sort of success stories. You know, if we really want to make such learning transformative and meaningful, we also need to reconsider, where do we fail? What is the reason for failure? And how can we use these processes where we are going through failures to really make them the starting point for meaningful learning? That would be my 2-minute response. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Really appreciated. And I like the way you managed to be provoked somehow, at least, and raise some stimulating points of your own. Thank you very much. Okay, well, now we have Professor Fuji from Japan, who will be talking to Priority Area 3, Building Capacities of Educators. And I know, Professor Fuji, you'll also be presenting a bit later on in the conference, but please could you briefly introduce yourself? And you're going to be responded to by Benjamin, but we'll come to him in a moment.
Thank you very much, Leon. So I will share my slide. Okay, so in the topic 3, building capacity of educators. So Hiroki Fuji from the Okayama University in Japan and Professor Benjamin Jelsen, Friedrich Alexander University, Erlangen and Nuremberg, Germany will be provocation and responders. In the topic 3, we'd like to focus on the competencies of ESD educators. So UNESCO chair in my university has achieved the result of the ESD teacher education over the past 4 years, supported by Japan Society for the Promotion of Science and Japan Official Development Assistance Grants for UNESCO activities, and in collaboration with 34 institutions in 16 countries across the Asia-Pacific region. During this time, we received a great support from UNESCO Bangkok and the Asia-Pacific Cultural Center for UNESCO in Tokyo, and the international network of teacher education institutions associated with UNESCO Chair at York University, Canada. We developed the Asia-Pacific ESD teacher competency framework and its dissemination guide. This was the world's first international framework for ESD teacher competency. There is a great significance for what has been achieved in the Asia-Pacific region with a remarkable diversity of nature, society, and culture. Also, we built an ESD research and education network in Asia-Pacific and fostered the next generation of young researchers. In fact, the majority of researchers who participate in these projects were young researchers. This figure shows the overview of the Asia-Pacific ESD teacher competency framework. The center is positioned with the competency for shape future. It is a competency for teachers to participate, to practice ESD here, and now towards shaping sustainable futures. And there are 3 domains of the competencies that support the competency shape future. First is the domain of the facilitate learning. It is competency for teachers to create and provide learning opportunity for learners to develop their sustainability competency. The second is the domain of continue to learn and create. It is a competency for teachers to reflect, innovate, and transform knowledge continuously as a professional in ESD practices. And last is the domain of the connect, collaborate, and engage. It is a competencies for teachers to promote collaboration and partnerships to support ESD policy and practices within and outside immediate communities, including local and national authorities. Now, teacher education institutions across the Asia Pacific region use this framework to develop, implement, and evaluate ESD teacher education strategies, programs, and courses. Looking back on our efforts so far, we would like to once again confirm the competencies required for educators practicing ESD in the world. So what are the competencies required of ESD educators? This is the first question. And the second, although we ourselves are ESD educators, we are required to support the continuous self-growth of the ESD educators, such as teachers. What kind of the measures are needed to achieve that? So finally, the role of the UNESCO Chairs. What can UNESCO Chairs do to encourage the development of the ESD educators around the world? That's all my talk. So after that, I'd like to listen to a stimulating talk from Benjamin on these 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fuji. That was a very stimulating and important contribution. And of course, you'll be presenting later on in the conference on some of this work, I understand. So thank you for that. Okay, so over to Benjamin. When you're ready, please introduce yourself and give your 2-minute response. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Benjamin Jurissen from the Erlangen UNESCO Chair in Arts and Culture. In education, I'd like to thank Hiroki for his wonderful input. And I think I can connect to many points of this. I'd just like to highlight, answer shortly to his questions and to highlight some points. So what are the competencies required of ESD educators? I think if we think about the interwovenness of the 169 sustainability targets we're dealing with, that are all interconnected, we have to see that we need a kind of pedagogy that focuses on the overarching attitude, so to say. So this results in a call for transformative learning, which we need. Secondly, there's the issue of culturality. There will be no sustainable change towards sustainability if it does not connect to the cultural values, traditions, and resources. So we need to activate the ability to connect to cultural issues, to cultural sustainability, and to cultural resilience in teacher training. I think a third point is that we have to enable and to foster creativity and a more explorative way or design thinking way in teacher education also. So we have to foster the forms of creativity that connects to traditional, for example, ecological knowledges, while transforming this with regard to our present and the futures that we face. So teachers must be able to be creative in order to foster creativity themselves. So we need to rethink the modes of teacher education. What can we do? How can we approach this and reach this? We need a multi-level approach in teacher and educators training that includes more experience-oriented and self-reflective elements towards an attitude of change. We need to integrate sustainability perspectives into the various fields of and aspects of teacher or educator training. Sustainability has to become a default issue, not an example, just an example or an exception. So, and how can UNESCO chairs contribute to this? UNESCO chairs have the power to contribute to giving sustainability and the SDGs a voice inside the institution, inside the university, which is very important to foster this. And then, of course, we have our points of work, or like in my case, arts and culture and education. And of course, this is what we do. We bring this perspective in to connect to traditions and to the understanding of the challenges of transformation, as well a cultural transformation, for example. We foster collective thinking and acting in teacher training, and we try to teach being creative. So this is what I think we can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for that wonderful and concise response. Please, can I encourage people in the audience, please do post your questions. We do have some interesting questions already, but I'm sure the panelists are looking forward to some equally provocative questions, so do keep them coming. Okay, it's my great pleasure now to introduce Miriam Viela. Professor Viela, please can you introduce yourself, and you'll be talking to the fourth priority area, which is empowering and mobilizing youth. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you everybody who has already taken their time to be here and share your experiences. I would like to start by actually referring to what was said here before. I think it was by Mr. Burgos, Daniel Burgos, and some others, which was one of the challenges is for us to combine formal and non-formal and maybe informal information at once, but at the same time, the hybrid model of being presential and face-to-face or online. And I think one of the challenges for that is our own systems, because universities and public school have their own curriculum. And when we have to combine hybrid, face-to-face and online, but also combine the non-formal and formal education system, it requires a lot of flexibility and open of mind. And I think one of the things that I'm going to share addresses some of this, which is a project we have had with Martin Luther University in Canada. Okay, no, so this is not the one, just 1 second. So let me briefly share this with you. So I'm talking to you from Costa Rica. We have a UNESCO chair on education for sustainable development with the Earth Charter that is located here on the campus of the University for Peace, and it's basically led by the Earth Charter Center for Education for Sustainable Development. And basically at the core of our UNESCO chair, it's basically the intersection between sustainability, values, and education. So at the intersection of these three different areas is the core focus of our UNESCO chair work that focuses on research and training in the intersection of these three areas. And as part of our work, we help the implementation of 2 UNESCO resolutions, one that was adopted in 2003 and the second one on 2019, which both more or less say the same thing, but they basically recognize the Earth Charter as an important ethical framework for sustainable development, especially when we talk about the importance of values clarification, of examining our worldviews and values, or the importance to bring not only knowledge, but also values and skills in the process of learning. Then the Earth Charter can be used as an important tool or instrument for values clarification. So these 2 UNESCO chairs recognize the importance of the Earth Charter as that role, and actually even encourage member states to use the Earth Charter in education for sustainable development processes, particularly in the framework of the ESD for the 2030 framework. That was the last one. And we have 2 main avenues of work. One is working with youth and the other one with educators. Both have to do with engaging, empowering, and educating young leaders and educators in education for sustainability, using the Earth Charter as a framework. And for that, we have developed a number of resources and courses. The 2 that you can see on the screen has to do with online courses for young leaders on leadership, sustainability, and ethics, and a Earth Charter introductory course. So here comes the example I wanted to share at the beginning. With the Martin Luther University, we started an interesting project that, as part of their formal Martin Luther University that is based in Canada, in Ottawa, as part of their formal curriculum in a course, they incorporated our non-formal online course for young leaders. So it's kind of an example of a combination between formal learning of undergraduate students of their universities in Canada and our non-formal course for young leaders. And we also have developed, as part of our idea of influencing system change, an online program on education for sustainable development that is geared to educators, but thinking of the role of educators as key actors to influence the youth and the young generation. We do that work basically in English and in Spanish, given that we are located here. As a result of this Earth Charter leadership, sustainability, and ethics that has the purpose to engage, empower, and educate young leaders in the realm of non-formal education. We have been working with that for about 15 years in different formats. And as a result of that, young leaders are involved to continue to be engaged as Earth Charter young leaders. And we have Earth Charter young leaders in all regions of the world that are actually incorporating the values and principles of sustainability as part of their actions and making a specific effort to further engage their community, not only the universities where they are, but the community where they are located. I'm almost done here. As part of some of the resources we have generated, for instance, we have this book that was launched in December. That's a collection of stories of good practices on Earth Charter education and the SDG 4.7 from different parts of the world. And this mapping that is basically a social media app that is also being presented actually as we speak in this conference as an important tool to engage young leaders or invite them or spark their interest in implementing actions around the SDGs and sharing it in this social media app. Another very good example is the Miami-Dade College in Florida have been using this resource to engage their students, their undergrad students, in implementing the SDGs.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm going to have to ask you to stop there, otherwise we'll run out of time. Thank you very much indeed. No, really appreciate that. A very rich and colorful presentation and really opened our eyes to the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you so much. And now we're going to have Michel Ricard. If you could briefly respond to Miriam, we'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I will respond quickly with the example in Bordeaux with the Junior for Sustainable Development in Bordeaux School. This is a program, it's an ecosystem awareness program of Bordeaux City in order to place the younger generation at the heart of the action. We are following the four main pedagogical axes that are usually used: learn to know, learn to do, learn to be, learn to live together. And the result of this program is, of course, to respond to ESD expectation at school level. It marked predominance of teaching in line with society, to combine expertise of national education, teaching staff, local authorities, and NGOs. And it offers educational tools, teaching resources, project action, whole institutional approach, and special teacher training. The result of this program is that it makes pupils aware of the main precepts of sustainable development. It develops pupils' personal potential. It gives pupils the means to understand today's society, and It learns them to act to change today's society. This program was created in 2001 with 15 experimental schools and with the help of academic rectorate, City of Bordeaux, association and NGO. In 2020, 250 schools and 80,000 school children were concerned by this program. And during this period, the UNESCO Chair on ESD in Bordeaux and the RC Bordeaux-Aquitaine were members of the program. This program is showing an evolution along according to two main axes. The first one is to better understand the social and geopolitical consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second one is to contribute to the development of a more resilient society through the UNESCO program on Learning City. And
that's wonderful.
The result is that in this young become ambassador of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel. I'm sorry to rush you slightly at the end, but what an interesting presentation. We greatly appreciate it. Okay, we're doing quite well, and we're gathering some really interesting questions, which I'm looking forward to addressing to the panel. But our last priority area is accelerating local level actions, and we're very lucky to have presenting for us Hani Sevilam from Germany. Please, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Leon. Hi, everyone. I'm Hani from Germany. I'm the Managing Director of the UNESCO Chair on Hydrological Changes and Water Resources Management. And I am trying here with some pictures, actually, because I know the last speaker always that people now just hurry to go to the question part. So I'm just trying to give you more a kind of implementation strategy. Of course, I will focus on the South countries, and because we do have avatar-based learning activities that also help us implementing ESD, but mainly North-North collaboration. When it comes to North-South collaboration or South-South collaboration, we do have to deal with the reality, and I have two very practical projects. I hope you can see the screen, the full screen, not the other one. You see the full screen or
yes,
not?
I think that looks fine, Hani.
Okay, good. So we have been starting this project since 10 years, and it's really a continuous project that has different phases to apply ESD in Egypt. But when it comes to ESD, and we need to understand that ESD is different. The example of Spain cannot be applied as it is in Egypt because the challenges on the ground are completely different. You are facing here countries or schools that have lacking infrastructure. They are having overcrowded classrooms, as you can see, 80, sometimes 100 kids in one classroom, underqualified teachers who really have a lot of challenges, not only how to apply ESD, how to apply the traditional curricula. And that's what we have to deal with when we try to help these countries. That's why we started with a very long list of professors in different disciplines together with school teachers to develop and adapt some concepts to such local circumstances. And there are some issues that we had to deal with. We had to deal with lack of resources. So whatever we need to apply, we have to think of very cheap, low-cost models to apply whatever environmental concepts we would like to introduce. So we developed these kits for the teachers and not for the kids that really describe and explain them how and in which course, in which class, in which chapter, in which level to apply what activity, how to apply it, how to assess the performance, etc., and how to make it attractive for the kids. So we had kits here for water, energy, food and health, society, economy, and sustainability in general. Biodiversity also was part of this. And then we had to inject this into the existing curricula. Otherwise, the government will be resisting changing the curricula based on project ideas. So we have to deal with all these challenges. And then based on the developed concept, then we had to train the teachers. So teaching the teachers was the second step after developing the contents and the concepts. And then we took that all with the teachers under supervision, and we tried to apply this for the kids. As you can see here, we are always dealing with very cheap, very low cost materials, and also very innovative ideas that can, in some cases, or has to also explain very complicated processes to the kids. For example, here, this is theater activity that explains to the kids how can you deal with the concept of land degradation and how the farmers can profit from also protecting the environment, protecting the soil. And what you can see here is just like this is a farmer dealing with this area, and then they play a kind of game or also piece of art that they can do together that's developed carefully from experts to here, for example, protecting the Nile water and how the ancient Egyptians were dealing with that. What you see here, just paper that they painted themselves and colored themselves. And we developed the concept for this for order to bring them some ideas about water use efficiency, water pollution prevention, etc. And this was one example that we did for the schools. The second and the last example is how we introduced them and in a kind of capacity building, and how these countries that with all the water scarcity they have will deal with the future activities. So some of the activities has to do with the research, but this is not my topic here. But we try to provide hands-on capacity building on how they will do with the water scarcity in the future, how they can use the solar energy, all these water energy food nexus examples in an integrated form in order to close the loop and prevent any environmental impact of water treatment or water desalination activities. And you can see here concepts like producing more with less, concepts like water use efficiency. And here, of course, we had to train the juniors on how to use and how to apply this, which was already adapted to the local circumstances, and how they can help in making more with less water resources. So this is my contact. If you are interested in any of these activities, you are free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Hani. And without further ado, we'll go over to Prisco Piscatelli, please, from Italy.
Yeah, actually, there is the chair holder, and I'm very glad to introduce to you Professor Anna Maria Colau, who has joined us in the call.
Oh, thank you. I do apologize. Over to you, Professor.
No problem at all. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for asking me to share with you some of the activities of the UNESCO Chair Federico II in Naples. I know that the time is really very strict. I will try just to show very, very briefly what we are preparing for our chair. I hope that you can see my screen. Just tell me that you are seeing my screen in this moment.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very, very briefly. This is a chair that has been granted in 2019 and is dedicated to healthy education and sustainable development. And education, you already said how much is important, and even for us in the field of the health system, now we are just experiencing this pandemic that has really challenged all around the world. And I received 3 important keywords from UNESCO: nutrition, environment, and adolescence. And these 3 keywords are already included in the Agenda 2030 of the United Organization for the health of the entire world. And among the different things we intend to do in the next future, there is one of the activity creating hospitals in the public square in different cities. You see one of our events in Napoli before the pandemic. So you see no one has a mask. And in one of the activities dedicated to the prevention of obesity, because, you know, obesity is a pandemic probably more severe than coronavirus, and is dedicated to, is a sort of a, let's say, it's a sort of a journey that we organize free of charge for all the citizens, so they can learn in this journey how they have to approach nutrition and visits and treatment to reduce the risk of diabetes, obesity, and related diseases. And we are preparing next month from 30th of June to 3rd of July, again in Napoli, in the front sea, so in a very beautiful place of the city, another hospital only dedicated to women health, again in the setting of creating condition for health education, not only speaking and teaching, but also practically making experience in how women can solve many of the health problems they have in the family they might have. You see, the village will be built up in this way with several different journeys dedicated to cardiovascular, to oncological, to neurological, geriatric, and children prevention. So it will be a very big village dedicated to the health system. If you like to participate, please come. You just mentioned Prisco Piscitelli, who is one of the founder of the UNESCO Chair, together with me and many other co-workers that are advertised in the website that we created. And we also have an educational activity dedicated to teachers, because there is the need to have a group of teachers able to educate about health our children, our young people, because is in the young age you can really prevent all the different diseases. And this is our project dedicated to teachers and how to include other partners, together with school and university.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for introducing your chair, and it's a new chair, so it's very exciting to hear about this excellent work with health. Okay, before we start to take some of the questions, I'd like to just thank one or two people. I'd like to thank Catherine Cole, who is based at York University and has been helping us with facilitating this session today, and also to Tanya Klepacki, who's very kindly hosting the session. So thank you very much to you two for that. And Catherine, before we take the questions, would you be kind enough to please give a very brief overview of the booth so that people can understand what's inside our booth? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Leon. Thanks to all the UNESCO chairs that have been presenting already. You can see, as we are united through the SDGs, we are coming from very, very different disciplines with different backgrounds, and also showing how we closely work together through a global North-South dialogue. I'm just going to give you a very quick tour. I'm aware that not everybody who is joining the session today will have access to the conference platform, but I just want to show you how this looks like, how we're being able to present ourselves. So this is our conference booth. For those who are registered for the conference, I invite you to tell us that you were there. Send us a message in our booth in the UNESCO Pavilion. We are right next to the Futures of Education, and you can download resources on all of the UNESCO chairs and on the program itself. For those who are attending this session today but cannot access the platform, I invite you. I already dropped our central email address in the chat. Please send me an email and I will share with you the resources from this session and also additional resources that we are contributing to and contributing at this conference. Just to give you another feeling of what we've been doing over the last days, this is the virtual platform. This is the lobby where everybody is in and where we're trying to take the in-person experience that we're all terribly missing to the virtual space to at least connect to everyone. So that very briefly from my side. Again, please feel free to drop me a PN or send us an email if you wish to have resources. For those who can, please come visit the booth and have a virtual coffee with us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Katrin, and thanks again for your hard work in getting us organized. It's not an easy feat, I should emphasize. Okay, before we go on to some of the substantive questions, Charles, there have been one or two queries in the chat about the UNESCO Chairs program, people asking points of clarification. One is, how many UNESCO Chairs are there? Second question is, what's the ratio of female to male UNESCO chairs? It's a very important question. And thirdly, is there a UNESCO chairs linked to all of the SDGs?
Thanks so much for the questions. Basically, UNESCO claims at the moment there are 839 UNESCO chairs, 44 UNITWIN networks, which are usually a little bigger, and they're spanning 120 countries. I really don't know the breakdown male to female, but I would assume there's a lot more men than women. The way in which UNESCO chairs are formed is that there's discussion between the university and UNESCO and the national commission within their country. The university selects who will become their chair holder, but it is done with the approval of both the National Commission and UNESCO. If I look at my own country, I think there is a lot of work to be done in trying to bring the different perspectives, not only gender-wise, but culture and so on. But universities usually have a pretty rich pool to draw on. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Charles, for clearing up some of those questions. There's a lot of really interesting questions and comments in the chat, and please do have a look at those. But I'm going to have to be a bit selective now, and I'm going to ask each of the UNESCO chairs just to respond very briefly to 2 questions each. Okay, so the questions that I want you to respond to have been raised by our audience. The first one is, what is the greatest challenge that you face in your priority area? Okay, so each of you have a priority area. I guess they're thinking about the roadmap, the priority that you spoke to earlier. That's one question. But then this goes back to a point that Michael was talking about actually in his presentation about how do you actually get change done in that area. So two related questions each for each of you. Each of you will have 1 minute just to give your response to those. So who would like to go first? Michael, would you care to go first?
Thank you very much, Leon. Very simple question, difficult answer. For the challenge, one of the most important challenges is how you can combine fit for purpose policies to deal with emerging issues, with current and emerging issues, and keep the continuity, because a lot of the problem is there, that new governments, every time they start something, a new policy, to a certain extent neglecting the positive things of previous actually policies. This is for me one of the key problems. How we obtain things is not only the policy, it is the timing. I gave an example. Sometimes we are ahead or delayed. So one thing is to see how we can catch the opportunity and timing, and also the strategies that we follow. It's not only the policy itself, but the strategies to sell the policy and make it understandable and get the support of not only of the teaching, the educational community, but of the society as a whole. This is important, and there is where our chairs may be particularly useful in mobilizing other also stakeholders for this purpose.
Thank you very much, Michael. Wonderful. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you. I think the challenge here mainly is that on e-learning, many people think that technology is the key, and just the setting up of a Moodle or Sakai or any other learning management system and uploading some PDF files and some PowerPoint is enough, and this is really not the case. Methodology is the key, ICT is just the tool, and we need to find the balance there. This is the challenge, actually, to provide a good methodology to integrate all the technology facilities that we can actually use to make things better, more personalized, more attractive. I think that if we go on integration of these ICT and the methodology all together, the second question was how to make it happen through this integration. Is the actual way to make it happen is not just binary selection, either methodology, educational methodology and ICT, but following the previous slogan that the mantra that I was saying all the time, the integration of both things is the actual solution to make things happen. Thank you so much, Leo.
Thank you, Daniel. Wonderful. And Hiroki, are you ready to give your response, please?
Okay, so regarding question one, I would like to the response regarding question one. So one of the most important and great challenges is to incorporate ESD ideas, the ESD, to the teacher education. So then there are no common recommendations on ESD for university in national level to follow. So since the university are autonomous, and the ESD often depends on the teacher's interest, and teachers, educators, the interest, and it's therefore frequently uneven. So we have to incorporate the ESD idea and to the ESD educational strategy and courses and the programs to furthermore. So then it's a big challenge, and it's not so easy challenge. So I think, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hiroki. Miriam, would you be kind enough to respond?
Thank you. So what's the challenge we face in our priority area? I could say many, but I picked two. One is to increase our capacity to reach more young leaders, and even in other languages, because we are working in English and Spanish, and I think to be wonderful if we could increase our capacity to reach more young people and to collaborate with other institutions that are willing to amplify what they do through what we do. And the second one is break the institutional silos. When we used to be only working face-to-face, it required people to be all in the same place, right? When we are talking about online learning and online learning with young people, it requires to think in a different way, because not everybody needs to be in Costa Rica or in Italy or in Japan. And actually, the best we could do is to provide and offer young people a multicultural environment where young people are coming together, coming from different contexts at the same time. But the challenge here is that we are physically located in a place. Our institutions and universities are physically located in a place, and we develop curriculum that are kind of physically linked to that mindset that we need to be in a place, in an institution also. So breaking the institutional silo, in the sense that online learning doesn't limit us to that place, physical place, be in Tokyo or in Costa Rica or in Mexico. We could actually offer young people more diverse and multicultural contexts of learning by bringing together a group of 50 students from all regions of the world at the same time, because it's online learning. But the challenge here is that in our mindset is actually limited to our institution framing. So I think what Daniel Berger said at the beginning about combining non-formal education and formal education may help, but also I would just add inviting us to think in a different way about cooperation. And I think the ones that will gain is actually the learners. And the last point in terms of challenge is to provide learning for young people that are facilitated and led by young people. It functions much better than having old people facilitating or trying to engage young people in spark their interests. It just doesn't work in the same way.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Miriam. And Hani, your response, please, to those questions.
Yeah, I think I'm stressing on the challenge that we face of, we all have to reach the same SDGs. So the 17 SDGs are the same, but our starting points are different. So if you see developing countries and developed countries and try to compare where they start and how ESD will help them to at least achieve the SDGs in 2030 and beyond, that's very different starting points. The examples I showed, it showed that in some countries, they are far away from the level that you can see in Europe in terms of education. So to apply ESD in these countries, we have to be very careful. I'm not saying that technology, for example, blended learning or e-learning is only for the rich or only for the industrial countries. I'm not saying that. Sometimes ICT could be also a very helpful tool for cheap solutions, for virtual labs, for example. That's why we need to analyze that challenge. We need to analyze the starting points of each stakeholder, where they are and how to start, and then customize the tools that are necessary to really bring them to the level of achieving the SDGs. In some cases, you will depend mainly on ICT, depend on blended learning, or in some examples, like see Professor Nakan is present here, avatar-based learning. It could be very helpful in applying ESD, but in some other cases, you need really very cheap tools like recycled materials to explain educational processes or educational concepts. So we need to analyze the challenges to understand the stakeholders' needs and starting points, and then try to adapt and apply the right tools to help them to achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hani. Okay, so we're nearly at the end of our session, and we must finish on time because there's another important session coming just afterwards. But just to say that I think, you know, it's been a great privilege to be able to chair the session and to reflect on the comments that have been made. It's quite clear that education is centrally implicated in the realization of all of the other SDGs, and that education is also impacted by all of the other SDGs. I was also very struck by the complexity of the change process and how important each of the priority areas are. I think it's very difficult to isolate one of the areas. Each of the presenters and their respondents highlighted very clearly why each of the priority areas is important on their own. But of course, it's when we see them together that we begin to realize change at different levels and different scales. So I'll leave you with that thought. And I'll just take this opportunity once again to thank each of the presenters, each of my fellow UNESCO chairs for wonderful thought-provoking contributions, to each of the respondents for being suitably provoked and giving an equally interesting response. And once again to Katrin and Tanya for your work in keeping this very disparate group somehow organized. And most of all, to thank you, colleagues, for taking the time to come and visit our session, listen to our talk, and please do have a look around the booth, and we hope to see you at different parts of the conference. Thank you very much.